And Anthony, thank you very much. The next panel is one that I think is quite important because we all majority of people have been speaking today about, a box with a bed in major hotels, but there's a sector of the accommodation industry that's often forgotten about, but it does form quite an impact on it. And it's a short-term letting, accommodation, apartment sector, and good old Airbnb. And to introduce it, I'd like to introduce an old friend. I've known him for about 20 years, Trevor Rawnsley, who's the CEO of the Australian Resident Accommodation Managers Association, to introduce his panel on short-term letting and accommodation, apartments and Airbnb. Please welcome Trevor. Thank you.
Thanks, Adrian. Hello, everybody. A little bit of a lacklustre applause. We've got 30 minutes or less. Come on, fire it up. That's better. Less than 30 minutes to get you to your next sugar hit. This is a tough gig, the graveyard shift, so we're going to get there. We have our panel sitting in the appropriate chairs. Yep, thank you, Donald. Don't leave a gap in between them. Adrian and I have known each other. Adrian introduced me to direct booking back in 2003. That's how old Adrian is. I just left school at the time. And through his company, Fast Track, I understood a lot more about revenue management and occupancy, which in the management rights industry, the industry I represent and have invested heavily in over the years, it's mostly about occupancy. You'll hear, I'll introduce the panel in a second, it's mostly about occupancy first and then revenue second. I know that's a bit weird, but when you consider that each of our investor owners are mums and dads and we manage their investment on their behalf, it doesn't matter about your average daily rate if the apartment is empty. So we sort of twist it around a little bit, but Donald, as the operator on the panel, will be able to explain that a little more. So a quick introduction to the panel. Donald Borg. Donald is a director of Arama and an operator. He was on the tools this morning in his building at Cremorne. Donald will explain more about his building, but he's a volunteer board member of Arama, giving up his time today. He's got nothing to sell, just here to help. Our new best friend is Keiran Craig Jones. This is Keiran's public speaking debut today, so I'm expecting you to erupt into a big round of applause to welcome Keiran to the stage. That's better. There you go. Keiran is the Executive Director of Short-Term Accommodation Association Australia, STAAA. You come from North Queensland? Oh, did I put too many A's in there? An operator also, and Keiran will explain in more sensible terms what she does and how she does it. And last but by no means least, the snappy dresser on the end is another director of Arama and also a director of ResortBrokers, and you can explain what ResortBrokers do, but Alex Cook. So that's the panel. Yep, yeah, okay, you're still out there, I can hear you breathing. Thank you. Anytime you like, anytime you like. So a little bit about Arama. Arama is the industry that represents management rights. Management rights accounts for around about 25% of accommodation in Australia, funny enough. If you haven't heard of management rights, it's a very simple formula that takes on-site letting in a hotel like Donald's and also combines that with on-site facility management. And that forms a business called Management Rights with some real estate. Most of our members work and live on site, but not all. Recognisable brands in the management rights industry would be Accor, the world's largest management rights operation, Minor Group Oaks in particular, and lots of other small and medium enterprises. Donald and his partner, his business partner, operate just the one building. You'll see Donald is missing from our lineup today, and we do have an apology. Sue Fairweather, another one of our Arama members, has COVID, so Donald's come in to substitute at the last moment. Thank you very much for that. So Arama represents, like the Accommodation Association, we represent members. It's a volunteer organisation. I'm a paid employee of Arama. I used to be an operator back in the day when you could charge more for air conditioning, and some people would bring their own linen. You'd even charge more for colour TV. So that's really giving my age away. But we represent the managed rights industry, and we're grateful to Adrian and Fast Track for the opportunity to spruik the benefits of management rights today. But enough about me and enough about Arama. A little bit about you, Donald. So the interesting thing and the good reason why you're on the panel today is to help hoteliers in particular, or motel operators, understand that there is a wide diversity of accommodation available. Not everybody wants to stay in a caravan park or a tent, no matter how glamorous, or a bedroom. Many like to stay in serviced apartments, which is the business that we're in. And we're also in strata title complexes. So Donald has come from hospitality, in particular hotels, and you purchased your first management rights business here in Sydney. So can you just explain a little bit about that and your transition?
Thanks, Trevor. As been mentioned, my background is hospitality. I'm coming up to 30 years in this industry, and I'm an absolute proud hotelier. I've worked across Europe and down under now in pretty much all the sectors of the industry, and eventually found myself in the commercial, and my last gig was in corporate office running revenue management for Australia and New Zealand. 7 years ago, I thought it was a great idea to realize my dream, and my dream was always to own my own hotel. Very quickly realized that I couldn't afford to spend $1 million per room and buy the Hyatt Regency, but with a bit of research and a little bit more, I came across the management industry, the management rights industry, which at the time and still is, and I highly recommend it to anyone who has got a dream to have their own business and run with it, to seriously consider it. It's something that I always wanted to do, and in essence, it is hotel, but different. It's running your own business, but you're also from a day-to-day basis, you are effectively you're in the front face to the customer. You're the front face to the owner, who we don't just have the one, but we have got, with the likes of myself, the properties that I own and run on a day-to-day basis on the Lower North Shore. I've got 65 of them, and therefore 65 owners to answer to on a day-to-day basis. But also the other side to the management rights is that you are in a building that can be a mixed-use building. So there is that little bit of complexity that comes into play. And probably if I go back 7 years ago, I had no understanding of what that means. Today I can deal with it, and it's actually a very satisfactory part of what I do on a day-to-day basis. You are also a caretaker. You're also dealing with the likes of the building manager. You're also dealing with the strata manager, and you're dealing with the local community, dealing with council, dealing with all sorts of other stakeholders that in a typical hotel perhaps may not necessarily be doing on a regular basis. So a very interesting industry, and it's a great pathway for anyone who has got hotels in their heart and wants to explore taking it further.
Thanks, Don. You mentioned complexity, the commonality about management rights, and this is a heavily laden management rights panel today, sorry, Keiran. They're called complexes, so they exist in strata title complexes. And they're called complexes because it is complex, dealing with those individual issues. And it's complicated enough, Keiran, being an operator, but also being the executive director of STAAA. So what's your story? Why are you involved? What do you do?
Thanks, Trevor. So my name is Keiran Craig-Jones, and I'm the Executive Director of STAAA, which is the Short-Term Accommodation Association Australia. I'm also an owner-operator in South East Queensland as well as in the UK. I started out in the industry 18 years ago over in the UK, and I also have a background in legal, predominantly in the UK again. So we've only formed STAAA this year just because there was a gap in the space to really look after the individual, mums and dads, people with 1 and 2 properties and things like that, just to give a lot of education and support to them. So we formed it. We've had quite a few people sign up. And we're just here to really, give back to the industry and do the education as well as, at the moment, advocacy. Obviously, everyone, hears about short-term rentals in the media on a daily basis, so we need to work, together with other organisations as well, collaboratively.
It's a very good point, Keiran. We don't necessarily need to agree on everything.
No.
But there are some things that we have which are threats to the industry, some things in common. So we need to concentrate on the things that bind us, not the things that divide us. And there certainly is an attack on short-term rentals in our market space in New South Wales, where the government might run headlong into making some really bad laws, which make it difficult for small business operators to conduct short-term rentals. The battleground for that is Byron Bay. Byron Council, in their wisdom of, I think their new marketing phrase is "fuck off, we're full." And it's up to people like Keiran, ourselves, STAAA, and anyone else who wants to look after, mum and dad operators in particular, to help the government understand that tourism and tourism accommodation is a huge economic benefit, pays good taxes, employs people, and it's an important part of that diverse mix of accommodation. So look forward to working with you in the future, Keiran. Just swinging back to management rights a little bit, it's a commodity, a business commodity that can be bought and sold. It's valuable, it's very attractive to banks, and does retain good value. The capital gains of a management rights business is quite juicy, and even since COVID, it's become even better, more attractive. So, bringing snappy dresser Mr. Cook in here as a director of ResortBrokers, ResortBrokers help to facilitate the sale of motels, hotels, and management rights. So, what are you seeing from the helicopter, Alex? What are you seeing about the industry from your perspective?
Are we talking about management rights specifically?
Yeah, well, let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, we had the benefit of being a nationwide agency, so we're active throughout Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, and when I say that, not just capital cities, but very, very much so on a regional basis. And activity has been, particularly coming out of COVID, has been very much driven by regional activity, on a short stay basis, as we've touched on earlier with other discussions. There's certain regional locations, ones that spring to mind being Sunshine Coast, Stradbroke Island, which barely had a COVID, pretty much as soon as the nationwide lockdown had ended in 2020, they were filling themselves with domestic travellers straight the way back up to 80-90% occupancy. Obviously, when we sell businesses, we typically sell them in the last 12 to 24 months figures. They'd really only had a 2-month blip. We were able to normalise those figures out, and we were still selling those businesses. I mean, I'll always remember a sale of a complex on Hastings Street in Noosa, Tinjarana, which we sold at a record multiplier in July 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. So that's
what was the multiplier?
6.2, 6.3 times on the net income. So that's one end of the scale. And then you look at capital cities would be a good example. Now, capital cities have got obviously much deeper stock levels, and what's become evident from COVID is they're very much reliant on interstate travel and domestic travel. Even more so to the point, because the capital cities had longer to deal with COVID, a lot of short stay operators converted their stock over to permanent occupation, which is one of the good things about management rights. It's a very resilient model. If the short stay market isn't performing so well, you've got the opportunity to put units which are in your stock and rent them out on a permanent basis, so you can continue getting a return from that owner and retain the letting appointments. The flip side of that, COVID's ended. The domestic travel, interstate travellers are back, international travellers are back. Those that are in the short stay pool are starting to get returns, but they've also got to convert those permanent letting appointments back over to short stay. So we've needed the market to come back, we've needed units to convert back. So if you look at the capital cities, although those businesses have continued to pay their bills and they've still been good businesses throughout COVID, they're really only just now getting back to pre-COVID levels. So Brisbane is a very good example now. We're literally, the last month or two, we're starting to see the first large transactions that we've seen since 2019. So plenty going on, and it has been, there's always plenty going on, but it's very regional specific. Yeah.
And it was a good point you made about the ability, based on market demand, to operate management rights letting businesses short stay or long stay. COVID was a really good example. On the Gold Coast in particular, a lot of operators transferred into the long-term letting rental market, and many have still stayed there. There's a housing crisis, and so rentals are very popular right now, and serviced apartments for corporate travellers in particular on a long-term basis. You know, sometimes there are, I mean, at Sunshine Coast, there's Maroochydore Airport and other major infrastructure projects. Those traditional holiday apartments are really useful to turn into that medium or long-term rental market as well. Yield is a little lower, but again, the occupancy is so high, it's very attractive to operate that way. Let's just talk about the scale, the size of the industry. We know there's a minimum 3,300 buildings, possibly more in Australia.
Yeah, we Resort Brokers, we've hired a young gun property analyst who's been great, and we put together the first industry report on management rights last year, which you can find on our website. It's nothing to do with Resort Brokers, it's about the industry in general, but we did a lot of research, and I think we've said there's about 3,800 management rights across Australia. Probably low 3,000s of those are in Queensland, so it's a very Queensland-centric model. The value of those assets is probably about $4.5 billion. Employs about probably 30 to 35,000 people. What I find really interesting, if you look at Queensland, there's about 88,000 short stay hotel serviced apartment rooms in Queensland. Probably 30 to 35,000 of them operate under a management rights model. So, you know, Queensland tourism would be a very different thing if it wasn't for management rights, particularly when you get to those smaller regional towns. Like if you look at Port Douglas, Airlie Beach, places like that, places where it's essentially very hard to get a hotel to stack up from a development perspective. You know, the opportunity to get that fractionalised ownership, where you've got mums and dads from Sydney and Melbourne buying apartments, which facilitates a developer to get it out of the ground. You need someone to run that. Management rights is the answer to that. So, you know, I think people really underestimate how intrinsic management rights is to Australia's powerful tourism sector.
Yeah, we make a difference. And we're trying to solve the housing crisis all at the same time.
Indeed.
So Alex's company, Resort Brokers, put together the management rights report. You can get a copy of that. I mean, it's really good data. We're not going to bore you with data. You've had a lot of really interesting data today. But if people want a copy of the management rights report, how would they go about getting it?
Visit our website, resortbrokers.com.au. There's lots of there's the management rights report, all sorts of interesting stuff about learning about the industry, whether it be motels, caravan parks, backpackers. It's all on there. I think some of my cards on the Arama front desk.
So on the Arama booth over there, Alex has left some of his cards just in case you wanted to buy a management rights business in the afternoon tea break, or if you wanted to sell, Donald, if you wanted to list your business for sale, there's a couple of brokers here in the room. But more importantly, get a copy of that report because it's quite insightful about the size of the industry, and it's a bit of a sleeper. Not a lot of people know.
And I would point out, we keep on talking about it being a Queensland-centric industry, but something Trevor and I are working very hard on is to expand the model in other states and territories. Obviously, Donald is one of the few few management rights operators in New South Wales and doing a fantastic job at it. But there's enormous potential for growth there.
Yeah, seaside resorts in New South Wales like Byron Bay, Port Macquarie, Merimbula, Ulladulla, they're dominated by management rights businesses. Port Douglas has 43 buildings that operate short-term, and 39 of those are management rights business. So there are some markets where management rights is the dominant player. On the Gold Coast, there are about 300, 400 management rights businesses on the Gold Coast.
1,000.
Pardon?
About 1,000.
1,000? There you go. Get the report. What would I know? So, look, we are running ahead of time, but we do want to finish you up, get you that sugar hit pretty early. So I'm going to come back to you, Donald, for any final comments, and if you want to dispense any wisdom, any hints, tips, particularly those who are hoteliers trying to understand what life is like in management rights.
Yeah, I guess as we already touched on, the complex side of the business, and complex side ultimately comes down to one thing, and that is managing the relationships. It's also the success or the key success to running a good business. Very quickly realized that delivering to the guest promise is great. It's absolutely front and center on what we do on a day-to-day basis, and as a hotelier by trade, that's ultimately what I walked in this business. But very quickly realized that I cannot do that unless I have got harmonious relationships with each and every owner that I have got on my list. Relationships with owner-occupiers within the business. I mean, you know, on a day-to-day basis, they are ultimately the community that I am working within, and I need to be delivering also to their expectations of what they want to see in the building. So yes, I'm a hotelier, but I'm also running the show from a building management perspective. So that's the complexity side of it. The key point is relationships. I think working in my previous role in corporate world, that was the success factor in managing across the different hotels and head office and different owners. But when you're running your own business, that is multiplied because ultimately you are it. There is no sales department, there is no marketing department, there's no revenue department, there is no any other department. You are it. So having those relationships in place in order for you to be able to lean on when you need to get the support to drive the business forward in hard times such as COVID, or on any other day when you want to perhaps implement something in each and every room and you need the owner to spend the capital. You need to bring them along in the journey, and you cannot do that by just picking up the phone and say, hey, we're going to do that. They need to be part and parcel of the vision that you have got for the building, and they're supporting you without any hiccups. So relationships is the key word. Trevor?
Thanks, Don. Keiran?
I've actually got a question for Keiran.
Oh, yeah.
Can I ask Keiran a question?
Go right ahead.
This is just stemming on from a conversation we had earlier, Keiran. I think we both agreed, Airbnb in the public viewpoint, some people love it, some people hate it. There's mixed opinions out there, and I know you're all for, improving it and regulating it. How does that look? What does STAAA set out to do to make Airbnb be better and make it better perceived in the public limelight, public eye?
What we're trying to do is obviously a lot of collaboration across the different associations, having conversations with, the different local councils as well as state councils as well. In New South Wales, there is a short-term rental legislation which was implemented 2 years ago now. It is working to a degree, but obviously there's still a lot of work to go. In Queensland, we currently have nothing. In every other state and territory.
We like it like that.
Sorry?
We like it. Nothing.
No
regulation. Keep the government out of it. Best way to do it.
And we want it. We want some kind of licensing and things like that, because if we don't have the data available, the government, the media can't keep saying, there's so many STR properties. Well, it's not actually correct data they're getting. So, yeah, thank you.
Anything else you want to say, Keiran?
No, thank
All
you
good.
for having
Well
me
done.
today.
Well done.
Thank you.
Alex, you can have the last word. Second last word, that is.
I'm just trying to think.
Wisdom, hint, tip, tricks of the trade, or just want to say Trevor's a good bloke? Whatever
I
you want to
guess
say.
I just look. So I suppose I'm as an agent, I'd just say for any, resort brokers we represent the middle market. Our sales are typically 1 to 20 million. We're not selling to big funds. We're selling to mum and dads and syndicates and whatnot. And I suppose if anyone in the room fits into that category, and you're looking for assets, don't be narrow-minded. There's always a tendency to look towards capital cities or where you want to live. There's a wonderful regional world out there in Australia, and there's some fantastic opportunities out there. So if you're looking to buy, look everywhere.
Thank you. And my hint or tip is you're in industry. You should belong to whatever relevant industry association best suits your needs. You need to belong to someone. People like Keiran, myself, STAAA do a great job in representing the industry, and government, particularly when they try to bring in policy, need to be talking to industry to make sure policy is fit for purpose. So I encourage you to be, if you're involved in management rights, and we have some members here today, very grateful for your loyalty and support. And if you have a bona fide interest in management rights, join ARAMA. Otherwise, any kind of short-term letting, join STAAA or STAAA or whoever it is that you think can best represent you. But belong, collaborate, there's safety in numbers. So thank you very much, Don. Thank you, Keiran. Thank you, Alex. Thank you. Goodbye.